Anyway, please proceed. No, no, I feel very warm toward you, and I don't even know it.
Hi, I'm Bob McIntyre, and I'm Director of Citizens for Tax Justice. I've been doing this business for 34 or 35 years now. I mention that not so much to explain why I'm so old and gray and decrepit, but just to let you know that I came into this before President Reagan allegedly taught some people that deficits don't matter. We always thought they did, because tax fairness to us also means that you don't borrow the money from the future and put it on the next generation, but that you pay for it now. So we've been long-time deficit hawks, and we're glad to see that this commission is working on it too. Now, I assume when all the dust clears that the results from the commission will include both revenue increases and tax reductions. And I'm only going to talk about tax increases. I'm only going to talk about taxes because that's the only damn thing I know about. What you do on the spending side is up to you. And here's what we think you ought to do on the tax side. Income taxes, the tax that we know and love, sort of, is the part of the tax system that we need to fix. It's a mess. We haven't had a real reform of it since 1986. The barnacles have gotten very deep, and it doesn't raise enough revenues to pay for the government. In general, we think you need to get the personal income tax back up to about 10% of the economy, and the corporate tax back up to about 3 or 4% of the economy, as compared to the 7 or so percent that the personal income tax is now, and the 2% that the corporate income tax is now. Now, how do you do that? Well, part of it would be to get rid of more of the Bush tax cuts than President Obama has been willing to address. He's suggested keeping 80% of those Bush tax cuts, which are a big part of our deficit problem, and it's going to cost $3.5 trillion over the next decade if he does keep them all. He's got a rule that says nobody under $250,000 should ever pay a nickel more in tax. I think that's way too high a level, and we've got to get people like me involved in helping pay for this government a little more too. The second and more important part, or as important, is we need to close the loopholes that have grown into the tax code over the last 25 years. And you need to focus on what I think is the gross undertaxation of capital income. Now, I say that, and you may be shocked to hear it. I don't know. A friend of mine who used to run the Joint Tax Committee said to me recently, he said, you know, the economists all seem to think that we way overtax capital income, and the tax lawyers know that we hardly tax it at all. Well, I'm a lawyer. And, you know, if you look at what's going on with profits, U.S. profits being shifted offshore, a depreciation system that in conjunction with interest deductions produces negative tax rates on virtually every real capital investment in this country. What we have left in the corporate income tax right now is mostly just the government's return on the tax subsidies that it provided to these investments. There's really hardly anything left because the rates are generally negative on most investments. The offshore situation is a mess. I would mention going to territorial would make it even more of a mess, as President Bush's tax commission, which endorsed territorial, admitted. We get a bonus out of the loophole closing reform. Besides raising revenue, it'll probably help the economy because we won't have the government telling businesses what to invest in. We'll have markets and consumer demand deciding those things, and that's the way it ought to be. That's the way we did it in 1986 under President Reagan and Bob Packwood and Dan Rostenkowski. See what a bipartisan guy I am? And finally, one thing, a value-added tax. Don't do it. It's incredibly complicated, it's incredibly regressive, and it does nothing for us on trade. And if you wanted to read my story about why that's true, that and other things you can find on our webpage at ctj.org. Thanks a lot.
I see you're still disarming people with your humor, hanging around.
I got that from you.
Yeah, no, you're better at it. You always were.